Okay, so we've got this structure, but why do we actually care about it? Why do we need this framework, our reality, to actually operate in? Why do we have to follow the rules? And that's basically Giddens is saying because we want faith in our everyday life that we're going to be safe. Okay, the world can be a very scary, unpredictable, um, can be a very horrible place. So the reason why we carry on repeating these structures, the reason why we stick with our families, why we have religion, why we have routine, is because we have to have trust that life is going to deliver, regular routine. And then if we choose to add some excitement in, that's our choice. But to live in a world that's completely roller coaster all the time is just too much for the ordinary human being to cope with and understand, especially when it comes to something like identity. So if you think about a child who is moved from one home to another and never has a settled place of residence, never has a real family, never really has a home, their every single day is not safe. They're not able to establish an identity because they're just not in a stable place. They have no routine. They can't trust in everyday life to be safe and to take care of them. So therefore, their identity becomes sort of fragmented. And when every day is a challenge, it's really hard to establish what your identity is and who you are. So some people are so embedded in their routines that they become extremely shaken when things that they take for granted are challenged. So if you get, for example, the idea of sexism, if men are very sexist, the idea that women would work, or the idea that women would have an opinion about their marriage or their sex life or anything like that, that became extremely challenging, and men wouldn't understand how to take that. So, for example, that they're giving here is the idea of men acting in an effeminate manner. If you've got a man who's very, very hyper masculine or very traditionally masculine, that behaviour would challenge their everyday understanding of how things should be in the world that they've created. And it's saying here TV entertainers in drag pose no threat because it's shrouded in entertainment. Okay, so if something's presented as entertaining, then you can generally get away with it, but it's still, like gender stereotypes, but it's non-threatening. Okay, so drag queens on TV, for example, like RuPaul's Drag Race, or Dame Edna Everage, or Lily Savage, or Dale Winton, they're non-threatening because they're on TV and therefore it's not real. So you have to remember that human beings, we're emotionally invested in our world. Okay, we put in a lot of emotion into our everyday interactions, into our goals, into discovering our identity. So this is why when things cross traditional gender boundaries, and especially now, it's such an exciting time to be discussing this, because we have so much at the moment that discusses transgender, different sexualities. There's more of a discussion about it. So, but it's very contentious, as in it causes a lot of arguments, because it's such a massive discussion to be having. So that leads on to this idea of traditional culture and post-traditional culture. And it's not really like a new era, but if you take it from the fact that, let's say, from the dawn of man up until maybe about the 50s or 60s is really when, traditions were kind of thrown out of the window, the advent of the hippie and peace and love and all that kind of stuff. That would be sort of like post-traditional culture. If you think 40s, the way that women were treated and the expectations of gender roles in society, Victorian times definitely, and before then, if you could pick any era up until about the 60s and say that there was very clearly defined roles, and maybe around the 60s is actually when, especially for women and men, those ideas of masculinity, femininity was really starting to change. So Giddens is focusing on sort of like post-traditional culture. So hopefully that all makes sense.